Hi. That's weird. Strange hearing myself come from above. Hi, it's me at the... we are here today to present a panel called Barriers to Access, a patient and carer perspective. We were a bit late. When there's disabled people, usually there's some kind of issue because accessibility just isn't thought about. So we're all now lovely and cosy down here with you. But welcome, everybody. The reason we're here is there was a change in the law in November 2018 which enabled cannabis to be prescribed. But currently, only 3 products are available to be prescribed by the NHS. NICE guidelines state that there isn't enough clinical evidence for prescriptions other than for Epidiolex, which is a drug used for some forms of epilepsy for children. Again, I think there's only 3 people prescribed on the NHS for that. Sativex, a drug which is used for spasticity in MS, or Nabilone, which is a synthetic THC used to treat chemotherapy-induced nausea. And people don't even know that these 3 things are available. But there are also lots of unlicensed cannabis-based medicinal products which people can access. However, that comes at a great cost. These are private prescriptions. A lot of patients are living on disability benefits because we can't work. Funnily enough, cannabis might then enable us to work, but then we still have to fund the cost of these ridiculous prescriptions. So this is why we wanted to say we're here to challenge the barriers in access. There's a great panel here today who, it takes a lot of fortitude and strength to come and share your story as a patient. We get asked all the time, oh, can you just do this? Can you just talk about this? Can I have your whole life story? And that doesn't come without trauma. That doesn't come without, it brings up a lot of old things that actually we don't always want to talk about, but we do talk about it because there's people out there who are perhaps more vulnerable or not as vocal as us. So thank you so much to everyone for being here. We'll do introductions in just a minute. But we all work together to challenge the inequalities in access. We've got patients here from PLE, Patient-Led Engagement for Access, which is a community interest company put together by a team of patients. It's in the name, patient-led, for a reason, because nothing about us without us. There's this whole medical industry now, but actually patients don't have a seat at the table, so hey, we made our own table and people want a seat at that. We then work with the amazing MedCan support. We've got Matt from there, which is sort of families and carers and helping people to navigate the system for lots of people who have children with illnesses. And then also, we work with people like drug science and such. We've got, so I guess we'll go from left all the way across to right from you. We've got, first of all, Lex. We'll have a couple of minutes introduction from each person.
Yeah, hi, my name's Lex. I'm a member of PLE's Patient Working Group. I discovered Abby and her wonderful group of people at the beginning of this year, and I'm really not sure what else I'm meant to say.
You can, if you want to talk about why you use cannabis or anything, it's totally up to you, or you can pass the mic. There's no pressure.
So I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, fibromyalgia, and a bunch of other mental health conditions that coincide with chronic pain. Cannabis allows me to function to the best of my ability. Without it, I would be essentially bedridden. I wouldn't be able to leave the house. I wouldn't be here today.
Speak up a bit.
I
was just saying speak up a little bit.
Sorry, I'm really anxious.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Lex, and great to have you on the team. Do you want to pass to Matt?
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Hughes, Director of MedCan Support, co-founded with Callie and Hannah Deacon. So basically, we're an organisation, a community interest company, to support paediatrics, parents, families using cannabis. My son, Charlie, has refractory epilepsy, he was diagnosed at 10 weeks old, and the medications weren't working, available on the NHS. He was suffering 120 seizures per day. Cannabis brought that down to less than 20 a day. So for us, that's amazing. So we're supporting families for NHS access for prescription cannabis, supporting them in the private sector, working within the private sector, looking to bring research, working with NICE, government, just trying to bring about better access, better education, and that research.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, I'm Callie Seaman, also known as Dr. Callie Seaman, and there'll be many people I see in this audience that I know. And how did I get into this? Well, it's due to that man just sat there, my father. And if it hadn't have been for him when I was 15 years old, when I was diagnosed with epilepsy, who grew for me, I would not have gone into this industry. He took me to the local hydroponic shop and I learnt so much there. And I went on to do a degree and it wasn't for me. I went to work for GlaxoSmithKline and wanted to help develop drugs and just found that the pharmaceutical industry wasn't for me. So I went into the hydroponic industry. When I was diagnosed at the age of 15 with epilepsy, I was very quickly put onto something called clomazepine, which caused me to have a drop in my grades. But what I found was that cannabis helped that. For many years, went on and had no more seizures, but it wasn't until I was doing my PhD did I realise that when I stopped consuming cannabis, that this was actually what was stopping my seizures. So I got a prescription at the beginning of this year, and I no longer had to live in fear. I spent a lot of my life living in fear and hiding who I was. And I was lucky enough to join the team with Matt, our MedCan support, because we wanted to help educate others about this amazing drug. And it's allowed me to go and do research on the plant and be able to look at those secondary metabolites and how we can actually get those ratios correct. So I work for Aqualabs and I work with PLE as well as the advisory. So I come from kind of two areas of this industry.
And Callie has an amazing video on our YouTube channel that she did for Medical Cannabis Awareness Week of where does your cannabis come from, so you should really check that out on the PLE community YouTube. But I cried when she sent it me and I was like, what? It was amazing. Zack?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Zack. I'm a medical patient. I'm on the management committee for PLE. I've been diagnosed with anxiety since I was 13. I'm currently in the process, I've spoken about this before, in terms of getting diagnosed for complicated
can't hear you very well.
For complicated PTSD. I've been on all sorts of antidepressants. I've received electroconvulsive therapy. That failed to work. I've been considered for ketamine therapy at the NHS Foundation Trust, and then I've been a medical patient since the beginning of, since March of this year. And it's enabled me to be here. I'm 30 years old. My experience of the world is generally the four walls of the room I'm in. I have very severe agoraphobia. First time I travelled on a train yesterday to get down here. That was all because of medical cannabis. I was buying medical cannabis before from the illicit market, but my anxiety even prevented me from being able to do that because I would just overthink absolutely everything. So something like this is an absolute lifesaver for me. I really do feel that I've started to live my life, where before I don't think I was just living, I was just existing, where now I feel that I'm able to live. And actually that's something really great, but beforehand I couldn't do that. And it's just unfortunate that we're now coming out of a pandemic, so the world is just beginning to open up.
Thank you, Zack. Matt, you got your mic?
Hello everyone, my name is Marie Mills, affectionately known as Maz. I am also the newest member of PLE's management committee, and I suffer with fibromyalgia. So I basically had a security background, security, close protection, bodyguard and stuff, and then basically my fibromyalgia got extremely bad. So then it's been a case of a complete career change, and basically I used to take sertraline, propranolol, pregabalin, and also, I think I'm forgetting one at the moment, but there was another one, basically a cocktail of medication. And I basically believe that the issue with modern medication is that it deals with short-term issues. When you've got a long-term condition and you have to face the prospect of taking a cocktail of medication for a long time, it really affects your perspective. So things like that usually then trigger anxiety and depression as well, in terms of just your everyday, what am I going to do, how do I cope? So basically, thanks to PLE, they introduced me, basically enlightened me to the fact that I could actually, in England, get medically prescribed cannabis, which obviously I didn't believe. I thought it was an American thing, but they showed me, and then basically now I'm onto the prescription now, and everything started. Thanks to the research that we give back, we're able to get it at a discounted price on the basis that we provide the feedback on how it's actually having an impact on our life. And I can basically say it's having a very, very big impact on my life in terms of returning to work. They're turning it into a positive by converting to a holistic lifestyle, and that's basically where I'm going forward now, become a holistic health practitioner that uses CBD. and trying to encourage other people with any kind of illness as well as fibromyalgia and just converting to this holistic lifestyle and going down that road along with medicinal cannabis, and that's basically all you need. And you can literally not back to normal, but halfway to near normal as possible.
Thank you, Maz, that's amazing. And I'm Abby. My background is NHS operational management until ironically I got too sick and got made redundant. I was off my face on drugs. I was trying to manage the largest bone cancer centre in Europe on tramadol. If I had taken tramadol today, I probably wouldn't be here. I would be in bed. So I have endometriosis. I was diagnosed in 2012, and that took 10 years to get that diagnosis. I'd gone through hell as a teenager, all sorts of pain, not being able to eat, not being able to sleep. I then found out 5 years later that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, the same as Lex, and quite a few of our team have this condition. It's a connective tissue disorder. Endometriosis is more common in people with EDS. And for 5 years, all my hip pain and all these other issues were then blamed on the endometriosis. So I've gone in this cycle. 2.5 years ago, I had my pelvis reconstructed to stop me having to have a hip replacement so young. So I've used cannabis all throughout the recovery of that. I then managed to get a prescription last year, changed my life. My insomnia curbed, I was eating more healthily, I was able to exercise, I was able to start PLEA with a team of people. So I chair the organisation, and thank you so much to all of our wonderful volunteers and the people involved. There's more than 50 of us now who are all volunteering to share our stories and do the things that we do and make change and talk about the barriers to access so that other people can understand why this is happening. I also found out just this year that I'm autistic and have ADHD, so it makes sense as to why I'm the one hosting. Blah, blah, blah. I can't stop talking. But yeah, and just cannabis helps me function so well with that. For those with eagle eyes, you might also notice I am now pregnant, which means I no longer have access to a prescription, and I have not been given any other alternative to pain management or anxiety treatment. It has been a roller coaster. My partner will probably be nodding in the background going, yeah. So my prescription's very recently been withdrawn, and I've been speaking to drug science. They are going to map out a plan for women who become pregnant on their Project 2021 thing. We're all only here because someone became pregnant, so we can't ignore the fact that this is going to happen to a lot of women on these medications. We produce cannabinoids in our breast milk, so why are we hiding this? What's the alternative? They're not going to give me tramadol again, and they offered me fentanyl patches. I mean, we're going to slap one of them on my thigh now I'm pregnant. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? So, yeah, this is why we all do what we do, because none of these things make sense. So with that said, thank you, everybody, and welcome. Let's have a chat about the barriers to access. So we know now that cannabis is legal, but what are the barriers to access? Callie, perhaps you want to start us off?
It's a very good question. There's many barriers, and I think the number one is the lack of education. When you go to your doctor, they have no idea. Within medical school, all they are taught is cannabis is a narcotic. This is for getting high. And when I did my degree in biomedical sciences, what we were taught was only how to be able to detect it in someone's blood for a drug test. That was it. It was forensics. There was nothing about the medicinal properties, no mention of cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, the entourage effect. That wasn't even anything spoke of. So we've got one barrier of the fact of education and the lack of prescribing doctors as well. If we haven't got doctors who understand this medication, they're not going to want to actually prescribe this. On top of that, a lack of research. So in order to give this education, there needs to be a good, firm, reliable research done on this so that the doctors can feel confident with what they're prescribing. I can certainly understand why doctors would be nervous of this. It's a very complex plant. But what we need to do, and that's what we feel responsible and what we're trying to do, is to educate them, to stop that fear that they've got of it. Oh, it's nasty cannabis, it's ganja madness. You're going to get psychosis. Yeah. We need to get past that.
Absolutely. We will come on to talk about research as well, Matt, but I think you hit a good point about there not being enough prescribing doctors. I know this is something you're really familiar with.
Within the UK, there's only currently one paediatric prescriber for children. So there's approximately 60,000 children with refractory epilepsy seizing every day. And yeah, we have access through one doctor. So if they become ill or if they retire, they were initially 3 doctors, 2 have now retired, leaving us with 1. So that basically children of parents are having to go to the illicit markets, use unregulated THC. Now, cannabis THC can cause seizures. It's has to be very balanced. You need to get the ratios right, and it's very individual to each child as well. We've also got interactions with anti-epileptics. So many children are still using pharmaceutical anti-epileptics. It's not just cannabis. And this is where clinical oversight is needed. It's very complex, very serious. A seizure can end their life. So this is where we need that clinical expertise. Again, like Callie was saying with the research, there's no funding. So universities are really struggling with funding for research. Licensed producers in the UK that are producing or importing the cannabis, they're not putting forward for research. So this is where MedCan and PLEA, we are trying to bring that research to ourselves, working with drug science and collecting the data. So drug science, well, I'm moving on a bit forward.
No, go for it.
But drug science have recently published a paper for paediatrics to show that it's a 97% effective or chance of it working. So after you've tried a primary anti-epileptic, the chance of another one working drops to less than 5%. Cannabis, 97% of effectiveness. So that's amazing. That's for us parents, that's a massive step forward. And then across the cohort, it was an 86% reduction in seizures. So again, this is, cannabis is changing people's lives, changing the families' lives, and bringing quality of life. So again, this is where we need to be working with clinicians, working with industry, and bringing that research forward and bring that, as Callie says, bring the confidence.
Yeah. Lex, I know you faced all sorts of barriers with accessing cannabis. It's it is legal, but it doesn't mean that it's perfect, and we all know that, and it's exactly why we sit here challenging that we have to go private for this medication.
Yeah, so basically I was prescribed through one clinic, and because of personal reasons I wanted to change clinics, and this second clinic denied me a prescription because I'm under 25. Apparently being under 25 and being male puts you at significant risk of addiction. But so does being on opiates. In fact, opiates are far more addictive than cannabis. So I'm still trying to find a second clinic to take me on. I think I found one. We'll see. Hopefully they also don't turn around and go, yeah, you're under 25, we're not going to treat you. Yeah.
Did they give any particular reasoning other than the addiction, or was that all
no,
they were worried about?
No, it was you're under 25, you identify as being male, and therefore you're at higher risk of addiction.
And it's that's such a closed-minded view, because as you say, there's plenty of people who are prescribed opiates from a much younger age. I know people on the panel and in the audience have had that experience where there's no one bats an eyelid at throwing diazepam at you and other sorts of things. It's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Say that again. I don't know if it's a fear of THC. I wasn't told. I was just told that I'm at higher risk of addiction.
Well, I think that's something that we as PLEA should be following up and saying, hi, can you provide some more explanations around this? Can you provide us with some research around this? And what the risk is to prescribing this person cannabis versus prescribing them other things or not prescribing them at all? Because it's.
My GP will happily throw gabapentin at me, but.
Yeah, it's such a shame. Maz, do you have anything that you faced a sort of a barrier? I mean, lack of knowledge. You didn't know that you could get a prescription until the other week.
Basically, the first thing was lack of knowledge. I'd heard the laws have changed, obviously, and everything like that, but I just didn't think it was as close to home as somebody like me, in my situation, being able to access it. In terms of process, in terms of affordability. Originally, I heard that a nightmare story about people paying $1,200 a month and stuff for their meds. I was like, well, that's me written off then. But then, again, through PLEA, I realised that it was actually really accessible, and there's just so many benefits that come along with it in terms of the stigma, the pressure, being able to medicate. Where can you medicate? Sometimes you can take your morning dose, but then if you're going somewhere, going to work, do you really have to wait until you get home in the night, to actually be able to medicate again? When you think of having a condition like fibromyalgia where you are constantly in chronic pain. I know I'm fibrofabulous right now, but believe it or not, from head to toe, I have various different kinds of pain happening in my body right now. It's just something I've learned to live with and learned to maneuver the body in terms of. So again, when it comes to an invisible illness, it's just so critical to get the medicinal cannabis. But again, it's just more awareness is needed that regular standard people such as myself can actually get it. It's actually affordable now thanks to projects like Project 21, where if you give a bit of feedback on the impact it's having on your life, then you get it at a subsidised rate. So you can't ask for more than that. And it's not reams of research. You're not checked every day or monitored like, you know, the COVID tests like phoned or anything. Literally questionnaire, basic questionnaire, and then yourself, you get to then monitor, you know, the levels of pain or the improvements and everything like that happens along the way. So again, that's very handy as well, especially when you live with fibrofag and you can't remember anything. It will be good to see the way that the chart reflects the benefits that have happened with the medicinal way rather than the legacy way, let's say, which is very unmonitored. So that's a very major impact to me, being able to monitor it rather than the legacy method of just.
You touched on the affordability. Now it is still a private cost. There is still a cost. Some people are still paying £1,200, especially those with young children, where they need a lot of different products or a lot of an amount of product. But it's such a shame that this isn't recognised on the NHS and that this data, the data that we're talking about, and we'll come on to research, is Project 2021, where they have an observational study. It's a registry of your symptoms before you've used cannabis, and then sort of every sort of month or so you get a questionnaire to fill out, and then you can go and talk to a clinician about this and learn. I didn't realise how much my insomnia had changed until I was actually talking to a doctor about it. I wasn't self-medicating anymore. I became aware that I was using this for how neurodivergent I am. And like, oh, hang on a minute, that's why I'm using cannabis. It's not just this this drug that I've taken as a sort of, I don't know why. I now had my answers as to why I used cannabis and why it helped so much. But for me, a big thing was the affordability. Being prescribed different things meant soon I was adding up to about £450 a month. But I compromised with the doctor and then got 2 products and found something that balanced me out. So initially, the cost can be quite a lot of money, but I've managed to level it out before I got pregnant, to a point that, where I'm able to afford it but why am I having to spend my disability benefit on that when that should be what allows me to live a more normal life? Well, I'm having to use it on cannabis, but then that's kind of helping, but I still need to get taxis and do certain things that money's supposed to go towards, and I don't have any of it left because it all goes on the cannabis, and that's a big barrier for a lot of people. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to basically put some financial perspective on it, because I guess it kind of still leaves you wondering, well, when they say discount, exactly how much and stuff. So, how far from she said like 1,200 and stuff, how far down exactly? So my pleasant surprise was, I had my prescription. I was prescribed flowers, bud as we call it, CBD oil, and then THC oil. So originally it was starting to smell around 150 for each, so it started to smell very 500 a month, which was still a bit... But then to put it actually in perspective, I'm very pleased now to find out that it's actually £50 for 10 grams, if I'm going to be very frank. And I think that gives a very good indication of how affordable and obtainable it is for regular people in that sense. So I think we're just going to take questions in a sec. But I just wanted to give everyone some mathematics just to mentally get their head around it, because I know that does have a big impact. It had a big impact on me, as I said. It went from 1,200, then it went to half to the 500, which is still a bit, in terms of life. Well, this is the thing again. Even saying that with the discount, it's still hard to manage. You get your PIP, you've still got your bills, your mortgage, all the bills. You still need other things. You need a lot of holistic treatments. You need massages. You need to get to the gym. You need to have a soak. You need to do aquatherapy. It's very expensive to have an illness, let alone the cost of a prescription on top of that. And how much all 4 of these meds cost against the cost of my new prescription. And I'm looking forward to having that argument.
And we will talk about research in just a minute. Zach, have you got anything you wanted to add about the barriers that you might have faced?
I think it's stigma.
Talk a bit closer into the mic.
I think it's stigma because like for a lot of people, like if you have a mental health issue, the fact that I get a prescription from a psychiatrist, to me, absolutely blew my mind away. I thought a psychiatrist would be the absolute last person to ever prescribe me cannabis, because my fear, for me, it was very important to go for a psychiatrist because I have quite complex mental health issues. So I wanted my prescription to be managed for me, because sometimes, like, I'm away with the fairies, so I can't necessarily always look after myself. So I think actually it's important for me to have a psychiatrist who can take responsibility for my prescription, so I'm not having to worry about what products are okay for me to consume. Does it have too much THC, or does it not have enough THC for me? And also in terms of like CBD, what is the right product to me to consume? Like, I don't know that information. I'm not like a psychologist. I don't have like degrees in that. But I know my own life, but I think also that for me, it was important to know that someone else was taking that responsibility in that caring role, and then was prescribing a product they believed was appropriate. But I think another barrier is actually sometimes getting those products, because it's okay being prescribed a product, but then it's if that product's in stock, and then if that product's not in stock, then what do you do? And then for someone like myself who's prescribed for anxiety, there's probably only about 2 strains that exist. And then at the moment, one of those strains is completely out of stock. And that has to come all the way from Israel. And I think that is another barrier, the fact that all our medication comes from all over the world. Why aren't we consuming UK products? Supposedly to the UN, we're the world's largest exporters, and yet we can't access that product.
Yeah, where is the UK supply chain?
Yeah.
Why are we waiting for things to be imported? The licensed producers can only import the amount that has been prescribed, and then if they've got this prescription and waited for an import, and then all that's gone, they have to wait for the next batch. And if you're a patient with anxiety especially, or living in pain, how are you going to wait for that next prescription? Oh, we'll try something different. Well, someone like me who's stabilised on a medication that really helped, 3 times in 12 months that medication was out of stock. Now, to me, that was still more accessible than the illicit market, because you could ring a dealer and they'll say, I'll be 20 minutes, and then you know what it's like, 3 hours later, no one's there. So, and my aloe vera plants are nearly dead. I'm not one to be home growing, and I live in a tiny flat. I'm growing a baby. Like, I don't want to grow my own medication. I don't have a poppy field for opiates. Why should I be growing medication? That said, I've got no problem with people who do want to grow their own, but for me, I want to be able to be prescribed a medication by a doctor who understands the impact it's having on me, understanding why I'm using it, the fact that I now don't have to take this cocktail of opiates and be off my face on drugs. And it's, I think that if this was a UK market, it would be more understood, because patients thought it's just an American thing. If you're worried about speaking to a doctor about cannabis, some of them are just as worried about speaking to you about it. And I wonder if what response people have had from their doctors around being prescribed. I don't know if anyone's got any interesting stories to share there.
My doctor's actually very supportive. I try and all sorts of benzodiazepines, electroconvulsive therapy. I was then considered treatment resistant. Then started looking at ketamine therapy on the Oxford NHS Foundation Trust. And the only reason I couldn't get that was because my anxiety was so severe that I couldn't travel down. And so I then tried to go for the clinical commissioning group to see if they would fund the treatment, because it just needed an anaesthetist. Because it was literally just, my understanding when speaking to the psychiatrist was I would just sit in a room, receive it, and then that would be it. For 3 infusions, and then you would leave. So wasn't like a talking therapy. Yeah. So I couldn't understand why that couldn't be done in my local hospital. And then it was actually my GP who said to me, have you heard about drug science?
Wow.
Heard about this? Because I think actually it got to the point where my own doctor was completely lost, and he would say to me several times, he goes, I don't know what to do. I've referred you to all the teams I'm told to refer you to. They won't play ball. So it's kind of like, so for me, cannabis was the ultimate last resort. And it's something that I've been using since 2015. And for the longest time, I think, again, because of stigma, I just go, I'm using it at recreation, I'm not using it medically. And then I had the sudden realization, actually I am. And I think there are a lot of people who are using it medically, but I think because people around them say, no, it's recreational, I think they don't consider themselves as patients.
Yeah.
And then I think for me, then that added then to my own self-judgment, and that just made, for me, the situation worse. And I think actually part of this journey is actually self-acceptance of learning. I am a medical patient. I'm perfect. There's nothing wrong with me using this. And I think actually prescribed and not prescribed, if you've got a medical issue, I think we're all adults. We all know what's best for us at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That so many people out there are using cannabis. Well, why is everyone using it? Why is everyone here? What are we all doing? Why are people using cannabis? There is an underlying reason. There is a reason people are using it, and a lot of people haven't figured out what that is yet. You just want to be high. Well, why do you want to be high? What is the crux of that in your life? What is the purpose of that? And I think the stigma rolls right back around to education, because you said your GP's told you about it, whereas you didn't know. I'm guessing your GP didn't tell you about it. And it's Does anyone else have anything to add around the barriers to this before we move on to maybe research? Yeah. Matt's got both of you.
Yeah. NICE. I think that's a fundamental. So NICE is the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence. They oversee all medications within the NHS. Their stance is that cannabis needs to go through randomised control trials, like all pharmaceuticals. They see cannabis or it should be a pharmaceutical broken down into its individual components, CBD, THC, CBN, etc. And each of them needs to be through randomised control trials against a placebo. Our fight is to say that they need to be accepting real-world evidence. Cannabis, as its true whole plant extract, cannot go through randomised control trials. They're designed for pharmaceuticals. So this is what we're trying to fight, is to say accept real-world evidence, accept all these stories that have all been collected. There's hundreds of children, especially in the CBD market as well, and start licensing, or MHRA to start licensing products as well. So clinicians are, through their training, are very manipulated to thinking about medicines as RCTs. They don't see cannabis as a medicine. They see it as recreational. They still see it as this cannabis, and that all these patients are just basically getting stoned. And again, with paediatrics, although these children are obviously not getting stoned, they don't see, they see the impact, but they've got this fear of THC in the developing brain, which again is studies coming from the recreational market, and anxiety, schizophrenia, etc. And they've got concerns over THC and children. But again, we're saying that our children are thriving. They're actually getting better. They're able to mentally communicate better and transforming their lives. And this isn't being studied. There isn't any studies going forward. So yeah, I really feel that NICE for the NHS access is the fundamental block, and that's something that all of us need to be working towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that cannabis has been rescheduled in the first place, well, surely that's quite telling. And it's like they've done it and gone, oh yeah, there's access now. But then they haven't put that anywhere beyond the law. They haven't put it in any regulations and guidelines and guidance and whatever else. And policy change hasn't happened in line with that. And it's just so bizarre.
Again, you've got the British Paediatric Neurology Association, you've got the RCP, Royal College of Physicians, all these different organisations that clinicians are leaning to for guidance on prescribing. And they're all prohibition, essentially. It's all looking for RCTs in cannabis, and keep saying, well, this is never going to come. This is why we're getting these blocks and these children having to go to illicit markets and adults. It's because this research isn't being moved forward, because they don't understand that cannabis doesn't fit the pharmaceutical model.
And this is where organisations like the Primary Care Cannabis Network, run by GP Dr. Liam Barron, this has been established so he can try and get other GPs on board. They've just done a survey of GPs. I think there was over 1,000 GPs responded, and over 50% of them knew about cannabis and thinks it should be available and they should be able to prescribe it. Don't quote me on that, well, roughly was about that. And then there's also the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society. Myself and Maz and some other patients have just took part in some filming for their clinician training. So they're hoping to go out to these different areas and say, hi, these are patients involved in this, and these are the people taking the cannabis, and these are their real life stories. And then it's tapping into the universities as well and saying, hi, hello, pharmacy students, med students, even nursing students. This is what's going on, and we're trying to make sure that in future clinicians are taught about the endocannabinoid system, because we can sit here all day and talk about cannabis, but there's only one reason it works. We've all got an endocannabinoid system, and I think that is another barrier to access, that people talk about cannabis, as I've just done for the last 45 minutes, but really we should be talking about the endocannabinoid system. Everyone remembers learning about enzymes at school, the lock and key mechanism. Why is it not being taught that we have an endocannabinoid system with CB1 and CBD receptors? We produce endocannabinoids, anandamide, A2G, and this is what our bodies do, and there's a reason that this plant then works. So it's, Callie, did you want to add something before we go into research?
I think Matt really reflected what I was saying, you wanted to say about, thank you very much, you put it very well, the fact that real-world evidence isn't being accepted, that there's kind of a bit of a selling that, cannabis is the silver bullet and it's going to cure everything. The reality is, it's a quality of life improver. And a lot of people don't sort of realise that Matt will speak about that your doctor has actually observed that your son has improved massively through using cannabis, but there's no instant kind of response from it. And I think this needs to be looked at more in a whole sense, as opposed to it being, right, did it stop the pain instantly? Were you monged out? Did you go to sleep? And I think we need to stop looking at those things and look at the whole, how your quality of life is. You mentioned insomnia.
Well, this is I was part of a drug science study that they did on they did an MCDA, a multi-criteria decision analysis on neuropathic pain. And myself and some of the patients were invited. We had experts from around the world. Some were cannabis prescribers, some were pain management consultants, an array of different people. And the purpose of an MCDA is to look at what, this has only recently been put into the medical field. It's sort of done in all different other areas. And there's a very clever professor, Dr. Larry Phillips, said, hang on a minute, we can map this out for medication. So we mapped out all the medications for neuropathic pain, from ibuprofen up to different opiates, gabapentinoids, whatever else was all included. And then we added cannabis-based medicines, THC dominant, CBD dominant, and one-to-one. And the outcome of this research was that cannabis came out on top. Ibuprofen came out just as safe as cannabis, but it was zero for effectiveness, whereas cannabis was on top for all three of those things. So research is being done, but it's how we get people to listen to this. So there's also a fantastic British medical journal case report which has come out. I'm going to embarrass her by pointing her out in the audience over there. Lucy is absolutely fantastic. Her case study has been published in the British Medical Journal just a number of weeks ago. It is the world's first research on medical cannabis and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it's the UK's first research, And it's also the UK's first research on prescribed cannabis, because as has been touched on, all the research out there is on recreational, or someone was smoking this, or let's look at how bad it can be. Well, hang on a minute, let's look at somebody's quality of life. This is what the MCDA did as well. It wasn't just looking at pain management, it was your quality of life because of that pain management. There was cost analysis included. What about all of these different things that she's been through, going to a hospital, having this lifestyle where her mum is a carer and all these different things, and the impact and the cost of that has all been mapped out and put in research that's now in the British Medical Journal, and that is making history, and this is patients sharing their story. So how do we get this research to be listened to? What do we do?
Well, I'll jump in there. They keep telling us there isn't enough research. You go to Google Scholars, put your condition in and put cannabis in. There are hundreds, if not thousands of papers there. Print them off and take them to your doctor with you. Put 5 of them. Put this in front of them. Make them read this. They need to look at this. And it's our responsibility to take it to them, present it. If they're going to ignore it, we need to present it to them. The research is there, and it just seems to be an excuse. We, the people who know that this is working, we can present this to them and then tell them how this has improved our lives. Keep a diary. Write it down every day, what you're using, how much you use, how it made you feel, and take that to the doctor as well and force them to listen to you. Because if we don't do that, they'll just keep ignoring it and putting it under the carpet. They'll sweep it under the carpet and say, there's not enough evidence, there's not enough evidence. There is enough evidence.
Yeah.
Just picking up on that point, is NICE ignored 4,000 studies, real-world evidence studies, on cannabis in epileptic children. So they just literally looked at it and went, that's not evidence, threw it in the bin. And they only looked at 4 randomised controlled trials and 11 observationals. And some of them observationals, they threw them in the bin as well. And then they come up with a guidance for all clinicians saying cannabis isn't effective. Well, you've just ignored 4,000 studies. So, yeah, it's crazy.
And this is why it's so important for patients, even though it's at a cost to us, it's why we have to join these registries and say, okay, if you're going to prescribe me cannabis, I will tell you how it's working, and hopefully this information can then be used to challenge the NHS and say, hi, you should be doing your own observational study on this. This is the sort of money you could be saving by having people on cannabis instead of in and out of hospital all of the time. There's a whole host of reasons why we give this data, and it's because it helps. Hopefully it's not going to change the access for us, but what it might do is change access for future people, which might include us, and I'm really hoping it does. I never thought I'd see cannabis legalised in my lifetime. We've got so far as to getting medical cannabis there. We've just got to get the access right. We've got about 10 minutes left. If anyone has any questions around the barriers to access, how to access, if anyone wants to share.
If anyone can raise their hand and I can pass the mic to them.
Hello again. Sorry, Alan. I worked as, I'm a journalist, and I worked as part of the team that kind of got the Billy Caldwell case over the line, the medical cannabis case. I was doing freelance work for an organisation called Voltfas. And at the time, it was an imperfect solution. The licensing under specials, it was a poor solution. But it's the situation that we now have. I've sat and I've spoken to many people about the medical cannabis prescribing model. How would you? to people here who don't know anything about how to get a medical cannabis prescription, what's the process, just step by step? If you want to get a medical cannabis prescription for, £5 a gram, 140 an ounce, how do you get that?
We get asked this a lot. So our PLE has a patient working group, and we actually developed some resources around this because we get asked this question quite a lot. So plecommunity.org.uk/resources, and there is a guide of how to access medical cannabis. So we first explain what is medical cannabis. Then we go on to explain what NHS prescriptions are available and why NICE deem unlicensed prescriptions not available. And then we talk about the private prescriptions that are available, what the cost is to that is explained. There's a clinic directory, so you can find out what clinics treat what conditions, what the cost is to that, because again, that's such a barrier for so many people. There's all these clinics charging you for a prescription, some don't, some charge this, some charge that. And then it also gives a bit of an access scheme directory. Well, what access schemes are out there? What evidence can we submit to maybe get a subsidised rate? So it explains about Project 2021 and such like that. So really, it's finding out which clinics would treat your conditions, and then looking at the cost to that and working out what is most feasible for you. If you wanted to talk to people, we have a community membership, we have a forum where lots of people have these conversations and go, would you recommend this clinic? What have you thought of this product? Oh, this product's had an issue. Has anyone else had this issue? So we've got a really great patient community talking to each other about this as well, which people find really helpful. We've even got resources on talking to your doctor and managing stigma. Like I say, your doctor's probably just as scared as the C word as you are trying to approach that conversation. And it's having the confidence to say, hi, personally, I don't talk at my doctor about how great cannabis is. I say, are you aware that this is available? Did you know that this has been legalised? And here's some examples, and here is some research. And I try and always mention the endocannabinoid system so that they go, oh, that's why it works. Because if you just start off with the C word, a lot of people run a mile. But when you can break it down and explain it, I think it makes it a little bit easier for patients to approach and have that conversation.
Got one over here.
I would just like to. I want to answer one of your questions. Well done for your talk, everyone. Well done, everybody. You said, why do people use cannabis? I think in a nutshell, we can all say to feel better summarises it really well, no matter what the condition. But my question would be to everybody here, in fact, can you give your opinion, what is the difference between this thing called medical cannabis and recreational cannabis? Because I cultivate Gorilla Glue at home, that makes me a naughty criminal with a Schedule 1 drug in my closet. But if I pay the right person, I can buy Gorilla Glue and it's called medical cannabis. So I'm cultivating recreational cannabis because I'm not paying the right person. But if I pay the right person, it's medical cannabis and it's the same variety. So can you explain to me, in your opinion, what would be the difference between medical and recreational cannabis, please?
Yeah, Callie, do you want to... I'm happy to input as well.
It's generally down to certificates of analysis and the way it's treated afterwards. So it's having that guaranteed lack of microbial growth in there. So, for example, for Matthew's son, having a slight change in THC is a real problem. Now, when you grow cannabis, an actual change in environment can cause a shift in THC content. Now, for yourself, I'm sure it's not so much of a problem, and anyone who's got pain here, and no disrespect to that, it isn't such of a problem with a slight change, a couple of percentage change in THC. For Charlie, it can be the end of his life. And this is where it kind of differs, that the fact that we know exactly what's in it. We've got a certificate of analysis. It has been treated with either UV radiation or gamma radiation, which people maybe is not aware of what happens to that. That's in order to get rid of the microbial growth that can occur in there, that can grow on there, that can cause problems for the immunosuppressed. So that generally is the difference. That's where I would come from the difference. Now, when you say the word recreational, I don't like that word recreational. I just think adult use. Using it as an adult with all adults and everyone's consenting. So what you produce is no different other than this certificate of analysis, and what we need to be able to do, and I would love to see, is you be able to go to your doctor with your produce and say, here you are, this is what I am using, this is what it's done for me. Please put this on my record. Please tell me what the cannabinoid content of this is, and please tell me it's safe to consume. You're lucky enough again to be able to...
Yeah, I think it's... I think it's... this is why a UK supply chain is so important. So people like you don't get left out of this market, and you do have the chance to say, hang on a minute, this is how it's done. I could grow, and I could grow to this grade, and here's some certificates of analysis. But for me as a patient, I've been offered, there's a cannabis social club, they'll give you some cannabis. Well, eight years on, then no one's given me any cannabis, actually, and it's very cliquey, and it's all talk. No, I'm sorry, but you're going to take Charlie down to the local cannabis collective to be grown weed, and it's not there yet. I appreciate lots of people are growing to a great quality, and they're really helping patients where the NHS is failing to do so. But I think for a lot of people who don't have that, again, it's knowledge and the stigma attached to it and all those sorts of things, which is why there's been this bit of divide. But I do think people who are using recreationally, whatever we want to call it, adult use, I don't see any problem with that. But what I would encourage people to do is, think about why you're using it recreationally. Are you using it therapeutically? Is there to feel better, as you say? Well, hang on a minute. Are we all not using medical cannabis? It's just not gone through this whole testing process. So, exactly that, Phil. Thank you.
Abby, we're just going to... Sorry, Phil. You're up in a minute, mate, so you're going to have your chance to speak. We're going to wrap it up there. Abby, do you want to just give one last shout to Plea, to Medcan, to
please
Aqualabs?
do come and support us all. pleacommunity.org.uk. You can join as a community member. We have applications open for our patient working group and our support team, if you know anyone who might be interested. And we are going to have a donate button soon on the website if anyone wants to throw us a few quid. As a community interest company, every penny we make goes back into the company itself to just do more talks like this. We also Medcan Support. Is it medcansupport.co.uk? please also go and check out MedCan Support. You can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, and all the social jazz that there is and whatnot. But thank you all so much to our panel, Lex, Matt, Callie, Zack, Maz, and Open Abby. Hope everyone has a good weekend, and thanks for having us.
Wonderful, wonderful. Abby, thank you very much.